Hey there, everybody. This is Andre, the Game Idea Guy. Thank you for listening in, and I got a few subjects to cover with you guys today, so I'm going to go ahead and try to knock them out, going from the lightest to the heaviest. All right. At least the lightest to the heaviest in the social environment. Technically, the heaviest one is going to be the second one because it actually affects people's. Well, technically, both of them affect people's lives, but one is less popular than the other. That's why I say it's heavier. Like, it's a heavier subject because more people disagree with it. So that's where I'm coming from. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the localization of Unicorn Overlord. Because there is a long, and I mean a long thread on Twitter that is getting a bunch of replies, or let's just say X, that's getting a lot of replies, and there's a lot of argument back and forth over it. And it's because the person that initiated this discussion basically is saying that they dislike the localization efforts of Unicorn Overlord, more so because it's not a direct one-to-one translation. But when you say localization, you're not talking about direct one-to-one translation. Localization, in essence, is translation with giving or extending the meaning of something. Now, there are horrible localization jobs out there where they did just do a direct one-to-one translation and it came out horrible. Now, I'm not going to be all up and down on that person's thread. If you really want to find it, you can go ahead and look it up. I'm pretty sure if you put in Unicorn Overlord localization in somewhere, you will probably run into that thread. It comes down to them not liking the way the localization was done because they feel like the language that's used is too flowery, potentially changes meaning of some of the scenes that they depicted or pointed out. But honestly, a lot of the things that they pointed out, at least as far as I could see, because I didn't go through every particular thing in that thread, but a lot of stuff that I saw actually kept consistent with the feeling of whatever was supposed to be said, and maybe just added in some fluff here and there. That to me is not bad localization. That's my personal opinion. Bad localization to me is when you take something and completely change what it meant. Like what was done with the Prison School anime. When Funimation, I'm pretty sure it was Funimation, but when they localized that, they changed a lot of the dialogue to fit stuff that they wanted to say, not stuff that was actually said or that was congruent with what was said. So to me, that's a bad localization. That's why I will not watch that in dub, unfortunately, because I don't like when you change the meaning of stuff. Or I forget which Fire Emblem game it was, but they changed a character from being, I believe she was heterosexual, but they changed her to being a lesbian. And I think I get why they did it. I still don't agree with it. Or is it because they changed? No. I think she was a lesbian. They changed her to heterosexual because they're like a potion thing changed who she was attracted to. Or I don't remember exactly what it was. I just remember it caused a lot of problems. And it caused a lot of problems, I believe, for legitimate reasons. It hurt a lot of the credibility of localization for that. Or if we're really going to go back and maybe stomp on this, because this would be a better example, is the original Sailor Moon anime. The localization for that was horrible in comparison to what was actually said in the show majority of the time. And that was to take, I forget which Sailor Scouts they were, but the two that were lesbians. And they turned them into cousins and said that they were really close. I'm like, why did y'all do that? I understand you guys treated it like a kid's show because everybody's thoughts on animation back then, at least in the Western world, especially in America, was that anything hand-drawn and animated has to be for children. That sentiment still rides out today. I still don't understand that sentiment, but it still rides out today. And they changed a lot of the names of the characters. But then there is a good localization was with Pokemon. Actually, a lot of the Pokemon names that we have today happened because of localization of it. And changing things around. A lot of the Pokemon names that we have are from that localization. And they're like, in some of the names that the characters originally had versus the names that we got now, the names that we got now are better. So that's a good localization. For me, looking at what this person was trying to detail, and I'm getting back to the actual subject, Unicorn Overlord's language or localization they don't like, mostly, but again, because of the added wording and stuff like that. But when you think about what type of world it's supposed to be and the feeling that it's supposed to evoke, certain things have to be changed to match that. For a lot of what that feeling is, we don't have, or we do have the words, but they don't sound right for that setting. Like if you were to take someone's dialogue from even the year 1990 and to throw that style of dialogue into that game, it's not going to feel right. And maybe for this person, it's because the language sounds out for them, like different for them. It's probably a problem. I don't know for sure. I mean, you could make that argument based on some of the things that they said, but at the same time, it's like they're going back and forth over this particular game. I'm guessing they're talking about the localization because they don't want to support it. If you don't like the localization of the game, then don't buy it. I'm not going to tell anybody to go ahead and get it. But if you are actually interested in it and you think, hey, maybe the way the language is presented works decently, I'd say go ahead and get it. From what I've played of the demo, I'm still not finished with it. It's good to me. I like it. But then again, I also like Ogre Battle 64, and the dialogue in that is very similar to Unicorn Overlord. It's also stylistically very similar. Not exactly the same, but close enough. So, for me, that's why it's not so big of a deal, because I've played Ogre Battle 64, and I don't know exactly what the one-to-one translations are for that, but I know the dialogue in that works well, and Unicorn Overlord follows suit. So I'm perfectly fine with it. Not everybody's going to agree, though. Okay, next subject. Sony's layoffs. And Jim Ryan visiting a team that had numbered days. Now, this can be argued too many different ways. There's the emotional side of it. There's the logical side of it. There's no way to come out of this particular discussion unscathed. There is none. Because no matter what is said, no matter what is done, someone is going to feel crappy at the end of this. And honestly, I feel like Sony proper is using Jim Ryan as a scapegoat. Take all that negative energy and negativity with you when you leave, and we were right to kick you out the door. Even though this was a corporate decision, not a Jim Ryan decision. Let me explain. So everyone knows that Jim Ryan is doing his farewell tour for the company, which means that he has to go visit different studios and offices, give his basic farewell speech, take some pictures, smile, shake some hands. That's what he's doing. That's what's expected. And I'm pretty sure he visited a team that's in the UK. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. The studio that Sony has in the UK. And roughly 5 days later, they got the axe. Now, emotionally, my first response is, damn, that is messed up. That's wrong. And they knew they were firing these people, and they still had him go in there and give his speeches, shake hands, take pictures with people, basically try to build their morale up. Like, that's wrong. Like, that is sadistic in a way I could not understand or agree with when I first thought about it. But then you think about the other side of things. He's under an NDA no matter what. Like, there are certain things he just can't say, even if he's leaving the company. So he's not allowed to just go tell those people, hey, your jobs are about to be up. I know I'm saying goodbye to the company, but the company is also saying goodbye to you. You have to get out of here as soon as possible, or set yourself up for other employment ASAP, because we're going to be shutting this studio down, or the company is going to be shutting this studio down. He can't walk in there and say that. He logically can't just walk in there and say that. For as messed up as it is, Sony still has him by the balls. So if he goes in there and says that, there's problems that creates for him. And for most people, if it's a them or me situation, it's going to be them getting the brunt of the blow and not me. That's just how people generally work. So I can't be mad at him specifically. I'm not mad at him specifically, even though Sony is using him as a scapegoat, using him as a shield to say, hey, you take this bad press with you when you exit. We're giving you a nice severance package so you can take this BS right here with you and bounce. Because there's no way that they didn't realize that this was going to come up. And if they didn't, somebody's horrible at planning. But then you got to think about, like, if he didn't go there on his farewell tour, if he's visiting all of the other offices and he skips this particular one, it's going to cause some questions to be asked. That's going to bring up some concerns. And maybe this would have gotten out before it did. Probably would have been worse. Because then it would be like, well, they couldn't face us before they got rid of us. So there's no win in this situation. There's no win-win. There's not a win at all. This is a lose-lose. This is, you lose either way. How bad do you want your loss? And I feel for those people, because they were expecting to still have their jobs. They were expecting to still be working on projects. They were expecting that they still would have their income. But yeah, sure, most of them will probably find work somewhere else. Some will probably start their own studios. But it's still the fact that you just got canned and you probably weren't prepared for it. It sucks. It sucks ass completely. So I would not want to be in their shoes. It's horrible. Which also sucks that companies can basically just drop you whenever they want, but they expect you to give 2 weeks notice so that they can find replacements for you. But they generally don't give you any chance to know what you're up against. Now, some companies will, especially if they know they're doing layoffs, they'll be like, okay, well, hey, we're giving you a heads up. But at least from what was reported, these people didn't know that this was going to happen. They didn't get a heads up on this. They just, hey, Jim Ryan was here 5 days ago and now I have to clear out my desk. So I can understand where their particular frustration would be, and I can understand why they would be mad at him, because they saw him. He was there. That's why I'm like, this is something Sony's concocted to get negative attention off of them and just let him take the blame. Now, the last thing, and I know people are in general going to, not everybody, people that listen to me generally will understand where I'm coming from, but people that don't follow me that happen upon this and listen to the conversation and be like, yeah, I'm with you up until this particular point. 2/3, I got you. We good. That final spot though, bro, nah, I don't agree with you at all and you bullshit. But listen, Nintendo's going after the creators of the Yuzu emulator, which is the Switch emulator that everybody uses to pirate their stuff. Whether that was the intention of the team or not, it is the tool in which people use to do that very thing. And it doesn't help that they have a Patreon that they're getting just about $30,000 per month on. $30,000 per month. That is... How many Switches is that? People are supporting the emulator itself through Patreon, and that's where the legal problem is going to come, because they can argue off that's if you're looking at the base model Switch, that's 100 Switches per month. It's a drop in the bucket, but it's still an issue, because that's 100 Switches on top of, I mean, that's $100, not $100, 100 Switches purchased per month. That doesn't mean that's how many people are using the emulator though, or how many instances of the emulator are running, because obviously you can just download it for free, but it is still being regularly supported by other people. The big problem with Yuzu emulator, and I think this is why a few months ago they said we are against piracy. They said it publicly. I'm pretty sure that Nintendo got word to them that they were going to be coming after them during that time frame. That's why they said it. Because everybody knows that people have been using that emulator to pirate games. There's no two ways about it. Everybody knows that emulator has been being used to pirate games, and it doesn't help. And I believe I said something about this not too long ago, but it doesn't help that people have been on social media talking about how they are pirating games, and most of the time when they're doing it, they're showing Nintendo shit. I swear I talked about it was like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks at best, that I talked about this. About people openly talking about pirating games, because if you don't own it, then it's not stealing to pirate. It's coming to bear. There are multiple ways that this can be attacked. And everybody putting their shit on social media literally is giving Nintendo evidence. They're literally giving the legal teams evidence, because not only do they consider how many Switches are potentially being lost to sales for that, then you gotta think about the game sales, how much each game is worth. It starts to add up over time. Granted, yes, I do know that there are people who will go purchase the games, that they do have a Switch, and they go ahead and use their Switch, connect it to their computer, and transfer their files. There are people that do that. That's not the majority, though. It's not the majority. And the fact that you have people running around talking about pirating, and then they're talking about the emulator that they're using, and then you find out the fact that the Yuzu group is getting paid monthly, it becomes a detrimental argument for them. Which is again why I think they got in front of it months ago and said, we do not condone piracy. They said it publicly. That didn't stop other people from talking about it. And other people referenced them on a regular basis. I am not against the emulator existing. But there was one thing that someone said that I saw, I didn't pay attention to the person's name, But they said Nintendo doesn't have a case because the emulator doesn't use their proprietary code. Now, I'm kind of wondering how that's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. But how is it possible that that's the case, but you can play games day and date even before they launch? You'd have to have the code itself or have the best workaround to that code for that to be possible. Because the problem is, a new game comes out, that emulator shouldn't be able to run it before launch day. It shouldn't. It shouldn't be able to run that game before launch day. Before the game is actually released, it shouldn't be able to. Because you have to have, one, you have to have the game, have time to load the game into the emulator to see if it works, and then to start testing and editing code to get it to work with the emulator. There's no emulator on the face of this planet that was ever created that just played all the games immediately out the box. That's a huge red flag. And again, there could be people that got their games early, purchased their games, got them early, and they decided they were going to spoof it to their computer or whatever platform they decided that they wanted to play it on. But Yuzu shouldn't be able to do that. That's a big problem. I think I may have said that on Twitter some time ago, because that's a huge ass problem. Because if your emulator can play the games that are supposed to be played natively on the hardware before the games are launched for said hardware, that's going to come with many problems. That's going to come with a lot of issues. Again, I'm not against the existence of the emulator. I just think it was a horrible idea to go ahead and put it out while the console is still on the market. If this emulator was released after the Switch had gone off market, this probably wouldn't even be a problem. But you have an emulator that can run content from a console that is currently on the market. Currently available on the market, and this is a highly popular product. Of course, that's going to cause some issues. That's going to draw some issues. That's going to cause some issues. That's going to draw some problems to people. Again, you don't have to agree with me, but you have to think about this logically. Like that, when they released this emulator and they're starting to play games day and date with the hardware, or even before date for the hardware, that causes issues. That causes a boatload of issues. And that shouldn't be the case. If a game is released and it's a new game, it should take some time for you guys to be working on that game to get it to work within that emulator. Even if you already have a lot of the understandings of all of the coding to the emulator, your emulator should not be able to play games before street date. Shouldn't be able to. That to me says there's code, proprietary code from Nintendo stuff in there. There's still parts of the Switch that aren't fully hacked. So how is it that you can just run all these games? Hell, the Cemu emulator still has issues with Wii U games. Like that's where I'm like, something's not adding up. Maybe I'm missing. Maybe there's some information I don't have, which is why I'm at this conclusion here. But something isn't adding up right. And like I said before, I remember this was a very recent subject. This was a very recent subject I talked about. because it's it's one of those things. It's like, I said it was going to happen, and then and stuff just starts falling into place literally right after I say it. Now, for people who follow me, and you know, when I say something and I'm thinking logically, I'm sitting here looking at it from as many angles as possible. And again, maybe there's some information I don't have. I'm not saying I know everything. I'm not omniscient. But I remember, this is probably 6-7 years ago at this point, I remember saying, and this is just related to me being accurate about things, but I remember saying, Xbox saying play everywhere or play anywhere is inaccurate because you can't play your Xbox no matter where you are. Then they started releasing stuff to allow you to play stuff on the cloud, so you can play your games anywhere. And again, just a week ago, just maybe a week, maybe two, depending on when I recorded stuff. Recorded and released, I mean. I said the companies are going to start going after people for piracy. Because people, social media, don't know how to shut up about anything. They don't know how to not talk about everything they're doing. People put their lives on social media. And it's starting to become a problem. It's starting to backfire because everybody's putting out too much information. And all that's going to happen is the company is going to start picking, plucking, and choosing that information that best fits their argument. I understand people are pissed. I understand people are mad, but this is their property. Of course, they're going to go after somebody who's literally copying their property and putting it everywhere else, and they don't get a cut of it. They didn't give permission for it. They don't get a cut of it. And a lot of people will reference the Bleemcast lawsuit between Bleem and PlayStation or Sony, where Sony actually lost that lawsuit. Major thing is, Bleem was still working on getting their emulator to work with a bunch of games. It didn't actually require code from a PlayStation to play those games on a Dreamcast. It literally didn't use any of the stuff Sony had at all. And it also didn't take away sales from Sony because, hey, you bought the emulator disc, you loaded that, swapped it out, but you still had to have a copy of the game to play it. That's the major difference here. You still had to have the physical disc in order for it to work. Yuzu, you don't need to have the physical copy of the game. You don't have to have spoofed it from your Switch. All you need to be able to do is download it. That's it. That's the major difference here I think people aren't remembering. Bleemcast required the physical disc. Basically, Bleemcast turned a Dreamcast into a PS1. Putting that disc in your Dreamcast basically gave it a PlayStation mode. And then you could take said PlayStation mode and put in a PlayStation disc and play the game as long as it was coded to the emulator. So again, major difference. By the time Dreamcast came out, PlayStation PS1's physical console sales were declining. But their software sales were still pretty decent, as far as I remember. And if you still had to buy the software, Sony was still getting a cut of the money. So you could argue Bleemcast wasn't hurting Sony in any way, shape, or form. But you can make the argument that Yuzu is actually harming Switch because of the one key detail that you don't have to purchase the games in order to use it. You don't have to purchase the console. You don't have to purchase the games in order to use this emulator. That's all they really need. And a good lawyer can run with those two details. And they'll even use the case that everybody cites. Because again, everybody's on social media and doesn't know how to not run their mouth. So consider that. Think about that. Absorb that. Ain't gotta agree with me. But if you've been out here talking about, well, if I don't own the game, piracy isn't stealing, you might be in the crosshairs. Because we all know Yuzu certainly is. But that's it. If you have anything to say, any comments you'd like to make, please do. I'm ready to converse. Otherwise, thank you guys very much for listening in. Keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me. And until the next time, enjoy your games and peace out, everybody.